On this episode of Technicolor Blood, more sequels, more prequels, more remakes, more of the things Terrence loves.
I do love all of those things, especially prequels.
Coming up right now on Technicolor Blood. Technicolor Blood, welcome back everyone. Glad you're here once again. As always, my name is Chris. I'm here with Terrence. Terrence, hi.
Hey, I'm super excited to be talking about the post-Halloween episode.
There's that energy I was looking for.
Oh yeah, I'm coming with the fire today.
Yeah, post-Halloween. Yeah, we have a lot of stuff to get to today. There's some pretty good development news and regular news and just a lot of stuff. So let's jump into it. As we now do, we start every show with what we've watched in the last week, since the last we got together for this podcast. I guess I'll start us off. We're coming off the Halloween episode from last week, or the week of Halloween,
where we challenged each other to watch something.
And we both actually came through and watched the movies we were assigned, which is notable in and of itself if you knew us.
Because it feels like homework.
That's right. Best homework ever, though. Okay, so this wasn't part of the challenge, but for the first time, I actually watched Hellraiser. I'd never seen this movie before. Again, not a big horror fan. This one just sort of escaped me. And I have to say, I was kind of blown away by this movie. I didn't really know what to expect going in, and the creature effects were insane. The story wasn't at all what I expected, because when you think of Hellraiser, you think of the Pinhead character that's on the cover of all the all the movie boxes for it, or the posters, and he didn't really play too much in the first one so much. I guess he became a bigger deal later on in the series, but man, Clive Barker has something wrong with him. I know this is not news to anyone, but man, there was some really amazing, insane creature effects in that movie that, especially it was made in 1987, and it wasn't ahead of its time necessarily or anything. It was definitely in that sort of group of the sort of the cheesy 80s horror films, but this one stood out to me a little bit more. I feel like had I seen this closer to when it came out, when I also saw the original Halloween and the original Freddy and Jason and all those, I feel like this one would have stuck with me way more than those others. It's kind of hard to judge that now because I saw it just last week, but I just feel like that one would have had a place in my brain. Yeah,
I think that's exactly what happened with me. I saw it at the time, when I was at the right age to see it, as part of that exploration of all those sort of slasher films that were so popular in the 80s. And it's definitely the one that stuck with me the most from all of them. Yeah. I always felt like it was the one that tried from the very beginning to sort of establish like a mythology, like this hierarchy of, the evil that they were introducing into that world for that film. And I always felt like the second one kind of picked up the baton and really ran with it. So for me, the first two are sort of, they blur together. I can remember, I haven't seen them since the 80s, but I can remember certain scenes and characters and elements, but I can't tell you if it's from the first movie or the second movie. And then I feel like starting with the third one, it all just sort of falls apart.
Yeah. It's probably when it became more about the Pinhead character, maybe. I'm not sure. I haven't seen beyond the first one either, but because of how we had spoken about it before, I plan on at least checking out the second one.
Yeah, I definitely remember that starting with the second one, they started introducing more of the Cenobite characters. And then from that point forward, every movie has to introduce a new Cenobite that tops the ones from the previous movie.
Right.
And it all just sort of becomes a gimmick show. And I think that mythology just, suffers.
It's another movie that just seems like it's primed to be remade. They've remade all the other ones.
Yeah, I feel like that one actually would work best in a remake because of that mythology.
Right,
you can really dig into it and do something with
it. So another one watched last week, we actually challenged each other. I had never seen Young Frankenstein, and Terrence,
but you didn't know that last week.
Right. So just to very quickly recap this, I had said that I had watched at least the first part of Young Frankenstein and didn't really get into it. So I went to watch it last, and this is unusual for me because I'm a big Mel Brooks fan. Love Blazing Saddles, love Spaceballs, and a couple of his movies really hit those notes for me. And I love Gene Wilder, and I'm a big Peter Boyle fan too. So you would think this would be right up my alley, and I thought that I'd watch it and was like, But it turns out 10 minutes into this movie, I look over at my wife and I just said, I have never seen this before. I don't know what I saw. I don't know what I think I saw. I had definitely never seen it before. So all this time, there's been this gem of a comedy sitting out there. Probably Gene Wilder's most famous role, Willy Wonka, some others maybe you can argue, that I'd never seen, and I'm a huge fan of his. And also, obviously, Mel Brooks, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, those are probably the two that people would argue are his best, certainly most famous movies.
Sure.
And as you would expect, for me, I loved the movie. I really enjoyed it. Gene Wilder was at his most insane, crazy, rageful screams. Man, Gene Wilder is he is one of those guys where I forget how much I miss him until I see him on screen, and then I miss him all over again.
Right. Yeah.
He was great. Peter Boyle was great. That was a great movie. I am sort of embarrassed being a film guy that I hadn't seen it to this point and kind of misrepresented how I'd felt about it before. So there it is. Challenge accepted and taken, and I loved the movie.
That's kind of amazing. I mean, I can't imagine what it would be like to have that as a gift. That you think you've seen everything from a particular director or whatever, and then all of a sudden there's not only one you didn't know anything about, even though technically you did, but it also turns out to be one of their all-time best movies.
Yes. We used to talk about when Ed Norton was in his prime, people who were big Ed Norton fans, and I'd ask them, so what did you think of American History X? And they'd say, oh, I haven't seen that. You haven't seen American History X and you're a big Ed Norton fan? It's kind of the same thing. I'm a big Gene Wilder fan, and I've never seen Young Frankenstein.
Right.
Ugh. So issue solved.
All right. Glad you took care of that. I also had an assignment. I had never seen What We Do in the Shadows, which is a vampire comedy that you were hyping big time last week. And so I set out to watch it, and I did. And as you predicted, I enjoyed it a great deal. I thought it was a really, really fun movie. And it also kind of filled in some blanks for me because I never understood how the director Taika
Waititi, yes.
Waititi ended up getting Thor Ragnarok, because I was totally unfamiliar with his work. And I was like, that's like a big, complicated movie for somebody that you're kind of totally unfamiliar with to be given. And then on top of that, it was a pretty audacious movie in that it's the first Marvel cinematic film that's a straight up comedy. I mean, there's no glossing over that. It's just a buddy comedy, basically. And now I get it. Like, after watching this movie, it's a deceptively simple movie. It's, vampire roommates and a documentary kind of following them around in this small New Zealand town. And so, you hear that concept, and so you're expecting this really low budget, maybe even kind of campy film. And what you get is a film that pretends to be that, but is actually like far more adept, has a larger budget than you could possibly expect, but it's like used sparingly. Right. So you don't notice that there's a budget, and then all of a sudden there's a really great visual, and you're like, oh, that wasn't cheap. Yeah. Lots of little things like that. And then of course, just amazing actor. Yes. Every actor plays their character pretty much perfectly. A highly enjoyable movie. If you've never seen it, if you've never heard of it, definitely take some time to check it out. What We Do in the Shadows. It's on Netflix right now, and it's a lot of fun.
Did you enjoy the Rhys Darby appearance?
Oh, absolutely. I'm a big fan of Rhys Darby, and
I loved him in that movie.
You not only get Rhys Darby used the perfect amount, but it's also like young, thin Rhys Darby. Right. So it's like, whoa, I forgot that he ever looked like that. Yeah, a lot of fun.
I'm glad you enjoyed that. All right, we're going to hit the news when we come back after the short break. Let's talk about the news. Let's lead off with the stories. Well, I won't say the stories coming out. They've been out there a little bit, but it's relevant now because Bohemian Rhapsody has been released. And later on this week, we're going to have our standalone episode that's all about Bohemian Rhapsody. But we figure in this episode, we'll talk a little bit about the news surrounding it. And again, it's not new, but Bryan Singer was the director, and bad things happened about a year ago this time of year that ended up having him fired from the movie. Erratic behavior, the director not showing up, which is just insane to me. Yes. And I don't know, what was your reaction to reading some more in-depth news about that?
So this is yet another case of a director being fired or leaving a big time production midway through the shoot. Zack Snyder did it with Justice League. Joss Whedon was brought in to fix that. We know how that kind of turned into a train wreck. The 2 original directors of Solo were fired. Ron Howard was brought in to try to fix that film, and that turned out to not really end with a good movie. So here we had another case of Bryan Singer was about 3 weeks away from finishing principal photography on the film, and he requested being able to leave the film. He claims because there was some health problems involving his parents. They were filming in the UK. He wanted to come back to the US. The studio said no. So he left for the Thanksgiving break and then just didn't come back. And so the last 3 weeks of the film were finished up by another director. Because Bryan Singer had completed so much of the photography on it, though, he's going to get director credit on the film. A little background on that is that Bryan Singer has a bit of a reputation. He has a bit of a reputation for a couple of reasons. One of them is his behavior, just his professionalism on shoots and stuff, to the point where his contract for Bohemian Rhapsody actually specifies that he can't do anything that's unlawful. He can't miss shooting. He can't leave the production early. Like they knew going in that he had this reputation. They wrote this stuff into the contract. So when he started making noise about how he wanted to leave early, regardless of the reason he was giving them, the studio, they said no. We've heard about this from you in the past, and we're not down with it. Well, he just split. Leading up to that, though, there had already been reports that he had disagreements with the cast. Rami Malek, for example, there was kind of a public spat between the two of them. At one point, one of the other actors quit the production for a few weeks before coming back. The one who plays Jim Beach, the lawyer in the film, right? Because he just was fed up with Singer's behavior. Some of the anonymous reports were that, and this is something that he's been accused of on other productions as well, is that, he's one of those guys that, works really, really hard. He'll shoot, stay up real late, just grinding away on a film. He'll get exhausted and then he'll just not show up. And in most cases, the cinematographer ends up having to step in for a few days and direct the film to keep the production rolling.
I can't even imagine.
Yeah. So that's what led up to him being fired from the film, at least as far as the official rumors go.
Yeah. That director who picked up the rest of the shoot was Dexter Fletcher. And if you don't recognize the name, he's that sort of actor who kind of looks like Harry Connick Jr. a little bit.
Right.
Interesting bit of trivia. I don't know if it's trivia, but fact. Dexter Fletcher was in Band of Brothers, the HBO wartime miniseries. And Rami Malek, who played Freddie Mercury, was in the Pacific HBO wartime show. So those two had previously sort of been in the same circles. It wasn't the same production, but a lot of the same producers. And anyway, Dexter Fletcher was the one who picked up the direction to finish that movie off. I'd also read that they apparently approached Ridley Scott about finishing the movie. And of course, I'm sure he laughed at that.
Yes.
I don't know why. I mean, the idea, I think people may forget that the director's job doesn't stop when the shooting ends.
Right.
You have all this stuff that's already been shot, and now you're expected to come in, direct a few more shoots, and then see the movie through the end. When you're Ridley Scott, no. Yeah,
he doesn't clean up anyone's mess.
Yeah, strange thing. So thought that was an interesting bit to talk about, and Bryan Singer, apparently it was a passion project for him.
There's one other thing that I want to mention about Bryan Singer. Ties back into the whole notion that he was fired for leaving to deal with something involving the health of his parents. There's another rumor regarding why he actually left the production, and that is there's an upcoming Esquire article that's set to be released sometime before the end of the year, or at least that's what everyone is speculating, that will outline the long-standing rumors about his, I really don't know how to describe it. He's sort of he's sort of wrapped up in the whole Me Too movement. In the case of Bryan Singer, of course, he's gay. But some of the allegations that have been leveled against powerful producers and directors in Hollywood, and how they've used that power to sort of try to advance relationships with actors and actresses and stuff. There's been a long history of rumors about Bryan Singer and that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah, to the point of casting people.
Yes, to the point of casting people specifically for those reasons.
Man.
As far as I know, no actors have ever come out and openly accused him of that. It's always just been sort of, backstage discussions and stuff in Hollywood. Mm-hmm. But, when he left the production and didn't come back, that was one of the rumors, was that he was leaving in preparation for the release of that article. Obviously, that article hasn't come out yet, so that's a pretty big gulf of time. So that might not be the case at all, but everyone's kind of waiting to see what happens when Esquire does publish that.
Man, for a guy who, his quality of his films have sort of gone off a cliff a little bit in the last 10 years or so.
Yeah.
I don't have obviously the box office numbers in front of me, which is really, I'm sure, what more drives whether or not he gets what projects he wants. But yeah, this is not a good look.
No.
Not a good look, and we'll see how Bohemian Rhapsody does box office wise. It apparently is poised to do pretty well. We'll see if there's any Oscar buzz about it, at least for Rami Malek, and maybe some of the photography. I don't know. I don't tend to think so for sure for Remy.
Yeah.
But that could put Bryan Singer right back up closer to the top again. But then you have this, which is going to undercut any gains that he may have made from this.
It's going to be unfortunate if both of those things hit at the same time.
Yeah.
And again, who knows for sure? This is all just, rumor, and it's a bit lascivious, and it might not even bear mentioning, but we're just a little podcast, and this is something that's been floating around. I first started hearing about it back when he was making Superman Returns.
Right.
So that gives you an idea of how long these rumors have been sort of floating around about him.
It's strange that these have sort of stayed under wraps a little bit as far as in the public consciousness, whereas the other ones have just, come out without issue. I wonder what's going on with that.
My guess is it's just because none of the actors involved in any of this have ever come forward and said anything, and they're still not doing that. Yeah. So, we'll see. Maybe Esquire's actually gotten somebody to be willing to put their name out there. I don't know. We'll see.
Okay.
All right.
I will also bring up something else. This Queen biopic has been in the works for several years. And Terrence, do you know the actor who was originally supposed to play Freddie Mercury?
I do not, no.
The original person who was going to play Freddie Mercury in a completely different tone of movie was Sacha Baron Cohen.
Oh my God, I do remember that.
There it is, yes.
Yes.
So apparently he had in mind to make a completely different movie that focused more on the gritty nightlife and the antics and all the sexual deprivation and everything that went on with Freddie Mercury. Because it wasn't just the fact that, Freddie Mercury was straight and he was gay, he was bisexual. It was just about the depravity of the stuff he did. And that's the movie that Sacha Baron Cohen wanted to make. And eventually, when, they got everyone together and Brian May and all, the ex-Queen members, and they got together, it became pretty clear pretty quickly that they weren't on the same page. Sacha wanted to make this movie that was all about Freddie Mercury and really more about him and not so much the band and the music.
Right.
And the rest of the band wanted to make a movie about Queen. Apparently, originally the bandmates wanted to make it literally about the band, so that Freddie passed away sometime in the middle of the movie and they continued on afterwards. He's obviously not a movie producer, he's a musician. So luckily someone talked him out of that, because that would not have worked.
Right. Yeah.
But it was enough that it drove Sacha Baron Cohen away from the project, / he was fired, / they all agreed to not continue. And I think famously last week, either Brian May, I think it was Brian May, who was quoted as saying that, Sacha just didn't really take Freddie Mercury seriously enough to be in that movie. And maybe that's true, but I think it's more about how it's clear that the Queen ex-band members, they didn't want to make this about Freddie Mercury's, the way his life sort of came apart and his poor health. They wanted to make it about the band. Yeah, they didn't want to exploit him, and they wanted it to be more about the music, which, there's room, I think, for that movie, but they can't be the same movie.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And we'll talk about that more when we have our standalone episode come up later in the week, which I encourage all of you to listen to.
I do too.
Yes, well, I'm glad that you promoted as well. All right, so next bit of news. The Avatar sequels apparently have been named. I don't know how much real news that is, other than it's the fact that it's being kicked up in the news again. They're shooting 4 more movies, right? Yes. The sequel names are apparently The Way of Water, and there's others. We don't have to go down the list of topics, or the list of titles. But the next one is supposed to be called The Way of Water. The next release is supposed to hit theaters apparently in late 2020. That doesn't seem too far away.
No, but I mean, they've been shooting on those things for a couple of years.
Yeah,
now.
they've wrapped photography, I think, on 2 of them. I read.
Yeah, I believe they've wrapped photography with the leads.
Okay.
Maybe on all of them.
Okay.
And now they're shooting the rest of the cast to do the rest of them.
Apparently, Kate Winslet shows up in the new series of movies. I don't know in what capacity, but she's going to be in there. So, James Cameron famously does things that Hollywood thinks are crazy and movie fans think are crazy, and they work out. So Terrence and I have both given up doubting James Cameron a long time ago.
That's the safest bet in Hollywood is to bet on James Cameron.
Yeah. Yeah, and there were a lot of sideways predictions about Titanic. And then I think even when Avatar came out, people said, okay, well, this will be a thing, but it's not going to be a thing.
Yeah.
And it was the biggest thing of all time.
Yes.
I mean,
the biggest thing of all time.
What better thing can be on your resume as a director that you had the top 2, at separate times, the highest grossing movies of all time? Both Titanic and Avatar have both held that crown at some point. That is just absolutely incredible.
And it's taken, 20 years for a film to come and unseat Titanic.
Yeah.
And even the film that unseated Titanic is still a mountain away from ever unseating Avatar.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course those numbers aren't even adjusted for inflation, so it's not as surprising when it's like the last couple of years and then another one comes last couple of years. But we're talking, Titanic was 1997, so we're getting away from that now.
Yeah,
it's been a while, and the fact that the non-adjusted inflation numbers haven't caught that is pretty incredible. All right, so we'll come back after another quick break, and we'll talk about some development news. Some development news. One of our most often referenced directors on this show, Ridley Scott, we've already mentioned him once in this episode. He is apparently moving forward with the long-rumored Gladiator sequel. So it was a story a few years back, I know, when Russell Crowe just on his own went to Nick Cave, who has cut out a little bit of a career in screenwriting. I think he wrote the screenplay for The Proposition, which was a Western a few years back with Guy Pearce. He went to Nick Cave, and this is several years ago, and said, hey, mate, you want to make a sequel to Gladiator? And Nick Cave basically said, sure, I'll take a crack at it, but didn't you die at the end of that movie? And Russell Crowe said, yeah, you can take care of that. So that was...
Sounds fair.
Yeah, that was rumored to be one of those things where, Russell Crowe's character... Maximus. I don't know why I blinked on that. Love that movie. Maximus died, and then in the sequel, he was going to come back as some sort of martyred Christian and possess the body of someone. That was the whole premise. Yeah, no, not good at all. So that was then way back when. So now Ridley Scott is talking about going forward with this sequel, and this is not at all connected to these Nick Cave screenwriting things, Russell Crowe. As far as I know, it has nothing to do with that script, which is a good thing.
Yeah, thankfully.
But it is a sequel, and I love Gladiator. It's a great movie. One of Ridley's best. Russell Crowe at the height of his career. But my first reaction to this isn't about the subject matter. It's just that in a galaxy of properties and screenplays and novels and literally anything that Ridley Scott wants to do, he can do anything he wants. I'm just a little turned off / disappointed that he would want to do something that's retread.
Yeah, this is no good. I don't want this to happen.
Yeah.
We all remember Prometheus. I think most people wish that hadn't happened. So
beautiful looking movie, but nothing else. Yeah. And I finally got around to watching Covenant like 2 months ago, and it was exactly what I expected. It was pretty. It wasn't as pretty as Prometheus. It was pretty, and it was boring, and I instantly forgot it.
Yeah, he's real hung up on revisiting every property that was successful for him, and we don't need that.
So should we be glad that he ended up not directing the Blade Runner sequel? I guess we kind of should be, right?
I don't know.
I know you didn't love that movie, but
yeah.
And he can literally do anything he wants to. He doesn't have a lot of time left. Ridley, you don't have a lot of time left.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly, at this point, I would rather him not direct anything than to keep directing these unfortunate sequels to things.
Yeah, apparently the only, and this is just rumor, potentially the sequel will follow the kid. I think Lucius was his name. The kid that like goes up to him and is talking to him through the bars before his gladiator contest. Now he's grown.
Okay.
It's nothing that I'm reading from this sounds good. And there was a time where we would say, you know what, we're just going to put our trust in Ridley, but the last 10 years or so have not lived up to that. So.
No.
All right.
What else you got?
All right. So Naomi Watts apparently has been tabbed to sort of be the lead in one of the Game of Thrones prequels. There's lots of Game of Thrones prequels that have been thrown out there. I have no idea if she's going to play a Targaryen or whatever it's going to be. I still don't like. I think a lot of the rumors about the prequels for Game of Thrones center around it being several thousand years before the current show takes place. All really I have for you here is that she's been tabbed to lead the prequel for it. And since you're such a big fan of prequels, why don't you just spend 20 seconds on that?
The moment you said the word prequel, I lost all interest. Yeah. I mean, I love Game of Thrones. When they said they're going to be spinoffs, I'm like, okay, bring them on. And then when they said, oh, they're going to be prequels, I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
All right. That just seems to be where the whole Hollywood universe is going these days.
Yeah.
Origin stories.
It's like they heard so many people complaining about them making endless sequels. Instead of them thinking, well, I guess that means we should do something original. Instead, they were like, oh, we'll just throw them a swerve. We'll stop making sequels and we'll just start making everything a prequel.
Yeah. All right. So we'll just move on. More MCU spinoff shows are potentially in the works for the Disney streaming service. So these apparently they may be centered around the Winter Soldier and what's the guy that obviously I'm not super well versed. The Falcon guy. that's Captain America's buddy.
Right. The superhero
Falcon.
name is
It's actually Falcon.
Yeah.
It's not the Falcon guy.
Yeah. Surprisingly, they shortened it to Falcon.
Maybe on the streaming service it'll be the Falcon guy.
So this is kind of a big deal because those are those are big name characters in the MCU and those are actual busy working actors. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of a big deal.
Yeah, and I guess we should mention that those two potential series join the ranks of the other two that have already been discussed, which are shows for Scarlet Witch and for Loki.
Yeah, so that's a lot of Avengers television.
Yeah. Well, Sebastian, like you said, Sebastian Stan, who plays the Winter Soldier, and Anthony Mackie, who plays Falcon, both those guys are pretty busy guys.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure they're just throwing a boatload of money at them. Obviously, I think it's great that Disney is going to be actually using the real cast members and not recasting for the sort of rebranding of their streaming service, which they're going to want to fight Netflix with. Mm-hmm. So that's great. I'm sure they're pulling all the stops, and I'm excited to see that a couple of years down the line.
Yeah.
And we'll see how they all intertwine with the whole universe of the movies.
I think it's interesting to note, though, that Netflix is canceling Marvel shows, and you've got Disney that's just stacking them up.
Yeah.
So is there fatigue happening that Disney is gambling they can somehow avoid, or was it just a case of, subsequent seasons of, Luke Cage and Iron Fist were just so much less well written than the first seasons that's what led to their demise?
Yeah, I've only seen little bits and pieces of both of those, and they weren't great. And I think Netflix just needs to cut the fat anyway. They've got so much stuff, and they just keep renewing things and putting extra seasons of things on. And it's a lot. And I will add to that, sort of on topic. I know you're not a big fan of the Daredevil series on Netflix. I've seen all the episodes to this point. I started the most current season, and the season premiere of the new season of Daredevil put me to sleep, like literally put me to sleep. And not just because I'm old, but like that was so dull, and it was so centered around the guy who plays Daredevil, who I'm sorry is just not a good actor.
No.
And it was almost like they went back to doing another origin story, and we've already done this. We've already done it. So not going to be recommending that one.
Okay. Well, that's enough television.
Yeah. All right. We're going to come back and we'll answer a listener question. All right, Terrence, we only have time for answering one of the thousands of listener questions that are coming from the thousands of our Twitter followers.
Oh, it's not 1,000 questions from just one guy?
No, not from just this one guy. He may have 1,000 more questions. But for this episode, we're only going to concentrate on the one of thousands of questions we've been getting. So, DeAndre, here is our little talk about what you brought up on Twitter. DeAndre had mentioned that he saw something about the Flash Gordon reboot that apparently is out there, and I'm very excited to talk about that because I love that movie. That movie has a special place in my heart. It's one of those movies of its time. It hasn't aged well at all. It is as 80s as any movie has ever been, but I love it. So I'm just I'm ready for all the hate and fire that anyone might bring for that. I realize it's not a great movie, but it's a great movie if you know what I mean. And to tie it into other things we've talked about, of course, the soundtrack was done entirely by Queen, and I can't separate those two. The music in that movie and that movie
There's no reason together. You should.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited about them doing a Flash Gordon reboot. I have to say that I wonder if the excitement about this might have been kicked up by Thor Ragnarok, because when Thor Ragnarok came out, a lot of people said, "Whoa, that looks like a cross between, a Marvel movie and Flash Gordon." And I think maybe that might have risen the profile a little bit of that potential reboot.
So the good news is that there's now a new screenwriter attached working on a new take on the script.
Director and writer, yes.
Okay. And then the bad news is, so what? Like, this has been floating around in the background since the 90s,
right.
And we still don't have a new Flash Gordon movie. Yeah,
the person writing and directing is Julius Avery. I haven't seen any of his filmography. He's got a movie coming up that has a trailer that's gaining at least a little bit of steam right now called Overlord, which is like some sort of Nazi zombie thing.
Oh, the trailer for that looks so bad.
Yeah, it ain't great. So I have hope that it'll be fun, but based on that uninspired director choice, I can't get too excited about it. I'm really more excited just to be talking about Flash Gordon, the original, because I love that movie so much. It's just so that movie. Did
you ever see? They blur together, so I can't remember if it's Ted 1 or Ted 2 with the Flash Gordon cameo.
I did see the first one, but I don't remember it. It may have been that.
Okay, so maybe it was in Ted 2. That's starting to sound more familiar. Anyway, it's got a Sam Jones shows up, reprises his role as Flash Gordon in it. It's kind of a wacky, out of the blue cameo that I'm sure 90% of the people watching that movie had no idea what was going on.
Yeah.
When I saw that, I kind of thought like, oh, well, this might jumpstart something toward that reboot actually happening, but it didn't, which just leads me to believe I can't imagine that there's any real desire in Hollywood to revive this. But we should point out that when something floats around for years and years and years and years, not happening, it can still happen. It can still pop up out of nowhere. Coming out real soon is that Battle Angel Alita from Robert Rodriguez and James Cameron. And James Cameron bought the rights to that Japanese comic like years, if not decades ago, and just sat on it. And it was always just talk that was going to be his next project. That was going to be his next project. And then it just never happened. And then boom, out of the blue, turns out it was another project for him. He had Robert Rodriguez directed, and that's coming out soon. Yep. So, I mean, we could be here next year and talking about how the Flash Gordon movie is about to come out. I would definitely not expect that, though.
Yeah, we'll see. I guess a lot will depend on how well Overlord does.
I guess that's a good point. Yeah, we'll see.
I think that's coming out, I want to say next week, so we'll know soon.
Yeah.
All right. So, and I guess I should mention also, we actually saw Sam Jones at some Comic-Con thing several years ago in Los Angeles, and he actually was in pretty good shape still.
Man, he was in crazy good shape.
Yeah, we were both surprised by that.
Exactly the same.
At the same event, we also spoke to Lou Ferrigno real briefly, and he was a bit of a dick.
Well,
you don't remember that?
I don't know if you remember the rest of the story. It turns out we were also...
Were we the dicks?
We were the dicks, really.
Okay.
Because we were like, man, that guy just was kind of rude and didn't have anything to say. And then after the fact, we kind of found out that like, he's got severe hearing impairment.
That's right. We thought he was sort of like big time in us, but it turns out he probably didn't hear half of the things we said.
Exactly. Super glad we brought this story up. Anyway, moving on.
That's what I do. All right, we're going to come back and talk about some trailers. Trailer segment. Everyone's favorite? I don't know.
I love it.
Do you guys like any of these segments?
Man, they love it.
I'll have to check the thousands and thousands of Twitter followers and see what they think. All right. Spies in Disguise. Animated thing. Was it a Pixar thing? I didn't catch the studio.
I don't believe so.
Yeah, okay. So Spies in Disguise. Will Smith. obviously a kid's movie. Yeah, it looked kind of fun. It had I didn't really pay attention to the poster, and I hadn't seen anything in advance of it, so there was sort of a twist in the middle of this trailer that actually made me laugh out loud. So I don't know, I don't see a ton of animated films in the theater. Incredibles 2 was the last one, but before that, it had probably been quite a while. I could be wrong about that, but Will Smith looks like he's having a lot of fun in this movie. Stars as a spy. Tom Holland is one of the other main voices. I think they're the two leads in the movie. And apparently the concept of the movie is that Tom Holland's character works to help disguise Will Smith's character so he can go in and do his whole spy thing. The trailer is actually a lot of fun. I don't know if it'll actually result in me seeing it in a theater, but I'm sure down the line I'll probably catch it as a rental.
Yeah, I thought it looked like a lot of fun. At first I thought it was just like a teaser because the thing that's so funny that happens halfway through, you're just like, is this actually what the movie is about? And apparently it is, in fact, what the movie is about. Yeah. So it's not really so much a teaser as the actual trailer to the movie. But yeah, of course the animation looks amazing. And, I think Will Smith and Tom Holland are probably perfectly cast as their respective roles. I think it's also got Rashida Jones in it, Karen Gillan, and DJ Khaled. So yeah, it's a animated movie that I think looks like it's probably a lot of fun.
Sure. All right. So wild swing in subject matter. Our final trailer, our second and final trailer, Boy Erased. This is a movie written and directed by actor Joel Edgerton. He was in Warrior. He played Owen Lars in a couple of the Star Wars movies. He's one of those guys, I think, that you see him and you say, oh, it's that guy. And you're not really sure what he's been in, but he's been in a lot of stuff. He wrote.
I did not have that response, by the way.
That was my response. I've seen him in a lot of things, but he's one of those actors that I think I get mixed up with other actors. Anyway, so Boy Erased, Russell Crowe, Joel Edgerton is also in the movie, though he's not the star. Nicole Kidman is in it, and obviously the young actor who I did not immediately recognize. I don't know if he's sort of an up and comer.
I think so. He's been in a few things. He was in Manchester by the Sea and Moonrise Kingdom.
Okay. Some critically acclaimed stuff from the last few years.
Yeah.
So this looks like a sort of a coming of age movie where this young boy is growing up in a deeply religious household, and he's starting to grow into his body and figure things out about himself, and he starts to figure out that he's gay, and he has to fight against all the prejudices that come along with that, and his father giving him hell for it. And it looks like a solid sort of Oscar type of drama that'll probably get a lot of attention. Certainly has a pretty good cast. It features Russell Crowe with the regular man's build, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I was going to say, when you watch the trailer, one of two things are going to jump out at you as being what this movie is about. One is you're really going to identify with the story that they're telling and what this kid goes through when he's subjected to conversion therapy to try to pray the gay away.
Yeah.
Or the thing that's going to jump out at you is big fat Russell Crowe.
Right. The reason why Russell Crowe is not going to be in the Gladiator sequel, other than already being dead,
right,
is that time has not been kind.
Oh man, he's been dancing with the weight demon for a while.
Yeah.
You've seen him sort of fluctuating and stuff, but
I love me some Russell Crowe,
Yeah.
He's always Russell Crowe.
Yeah, for sure.
Under all those layers.
Yeah. It's just, you get a bit of a Marlon Brando vibe from him. Like, you can't help but remember, like, the great young version of him. And now it's, still a great actor, but yeah, not in his prime.
He didn't look the same anymore.
No, yeah. But moving away from that,
yeah, let's
like you said, it's a strong drama. Obviously it's going to be a hot button topic, especially in the political world that we currently exist in. I imagine it will probably be very controversial.
Yeah.
And I think it's intriguing that it's written and directed by an actor.
Mm-hmm.
Again, after you explained to me who he was, then I was like, oh yeah, okay, I remember. But watching the trailer, I had no clue. I did not recognize him at all. So
yeah, he plays, looks like, I think, the priest in that movie.
Yeah, the minister in charge of the conversion therapy center.
Right. Yeah. All right. Well, on that happy note,
yes,
conversion therapy. Goodbye, guys. That'll wrap it up for this episode of Technicolor Blood. We really appreciate you guys listening out, as always. Again, check back in a couple of days for our standalone episode on Bohemian Rhapsody. You can hit us up on Twitter, along with thousands and thousands of other people, at TechBloodPod. hit us up there with questions, suggestions for topics. We'll kick it around. We really appreciate you guys checking us out again, and we'll talk to you next time.
All right, guys, have a good one and try to see a movie.
He was a dick.